assistance.
Hang in there.
Rogue hive detected. Hostile hive detected. Agent down. Agent down. Hostile hive detected. Agent down. Hostile defender drone detected. Rogue seeker mine detected. Hostile seeker mine detected. Rogue hive detected. Hostile hive detected. Rogue restore hive detected. Hostile restore hive. Rogue defender drone detected. Hostile defender drone detected. Rogue seeker mine detected. Hostile seeker mine detected. Boost about to activate. Boost online. The boost has been. An agent needs assistance. An agent needs assistance. Agent down. An agent needs assistance. Rogue hive detected. Hostile hive.
Hey everyone, RogueGold here, and at long last, it's finally here. Today I'm going to be going over and breaking down my top conflict build recommendation for TU20 in the Division 2. Of course, this has been hotly requested given conflict's surge in popularity this update thanks to the PvP mechanic changes, the balancing efforts, the increased rewards, right? Everybody's been asking me where the build video is at, so I'll say here at the top, thank you for your patience. There's a couple of reasons I didn't want to rush this out. For one, an update like this with so many sandbox changes I think necessitates a truly thorough testing for all of those changes and seeing what emerges in the gameplay. It's not something I could have whipped up in one day and felt genuine about or like I had ruled out all other options. And on a similar note, I really was just testing a shit ton of options, right? And if there's one thing to take away from this video, it's to keep in mind that this is in no way the only viable conflict build, right? Project Resolve in TU20 has bolstered a lot of old favorites, it's given rise to many new contenders, and I've seen some really creative stuff out there already. Rather, the goal of this video, because I know many of you are tackling conflict for the very first time, or at least are trying to take it seriously for the first time, was to find a build that I could show that is both incredibly effective and relatively easy to use. So I really tried to find the best jack of all trades option, and out of everything I tested, this build that I'm about to break down is what I found to be most consistent. And so here we are. If you've watched my build videos before, you might notice a trend in the title with some PvP builds I've showcased in the past, because what I discovered was that that framework is super effective, but there were some changes and tweaks to be made in accordance with Conflict's new changes to make it that best possible version for this specific piece of content. So that's a very long-winded way of saying I put a lot of time into this. I'm proud of how it turned out, and I hope you all enjoy. Let's go. Alright, and here is the build. As I said, if you've watched some of my build videos before, you might notice a few similarities here with how some of those are set up, but there are definitely some key distinctions and different considerations that we're taking in mind, especially given the changes they made to Conflict this season, like the removal of shade level bonuses, so you have to take into account all of the crit stats and other, attributes that you're losing out on. But don't worry, we'll go through one by one as always, and I will give you my thought process behind everything. Starting off with the primary, the Shield Splinterer AR. Now for some of you, if you've watched the channel for a while, you might be surprised that I'm not using the Eagle Bear, even though, I got a buff this update, it's really strong. This has just ended up being a better option for Conflict. The reason being, because you have a direct damage talent on here compared to something like the Eagle Bear or even the St. Elmo's or the Ouroboros, the kind of damage that the Shield Splinter is able to output given the buff they made to the F2000 base model and just how strong Perfect Optimist is, this is just a really strong contender in Conflict specifically. Now I understand not all of you might have this. There are two ways to get it to my knowledge. The one is that you can complete all of the Year 1 Hunter puzzles and riddles challenges within DC. You then get it when you unlock the crate at the White House, and then it goes into Cassie Mendoza's inventory rotation. Additionally, I have seen that you can now get the blueprint from the Descent game mode, so those are from the reconstructed caches, that is. So those are two potential ways, but still, I understand that this is a more rare gun. So if you don't have this, don't worry. It's not a necessity. You could very well just use a regular F2000 with regular Optimist, and you would still do plenty fine. Or any good high-end AR is still going to do well on this setup. But if you do have the Shield Splinter, I recommend it a lot. It is very strong this update. So on here, of course, we have damage to targets out of cover, because that's just the best one to have there. Of course, comes with Perfect Optimist, and then we have 2 crit chance mods and a 20-round mag. And that is the important thing to keep in mind. So if we take a look at the stats, I have over the cap on crit chance right now, which is of course 60%, and that's because you have to keep in mind that these stats go down as soon as you enter into Conflict. And that's because with the changes they made this update, you no longer get your Shade Watch bonuses. When you go into Conflict, all of these, you actually aren't even able to open this menu. It says your shade level is 0, and you just don't have access to any of these stats. What is slightly confusing, and hopefully they tune this up in a further update, is that it will actually still stay on your stat screen that you do have those. Like, it would still say this same amount when I go into Conflict. However, I did test this, and they are actually not applying. It is just a visual thing that it says here that you do have them. And I tested that by taking in a 100% hazard protection build, and I was getting tagged with statuses like I only had 90%, and that's because I was losing out on the 10% that you get from the watch. So you are indeed not getting those stats. Again, don't trust what it shows you on the visual screen. You just got to do the math and make sure that whatever values you're assigning to this don't actually, add up when you go into Conflict. So I believe I'm actually around right now 66 or 68% crit chance, meaning that once we go into Conflict and we lose the 10 chance from the watch, I'm around 56 or 58, and that extra crit chance, getting close to the cap without the shade bonus, is kind of a rarer commodity now, given so many people just kind of build the watch into how they build their total loadout. So again, it's a lot to keep track of, but just kind of keep that in mind as you build for Conflict this update. Your secondary and your sidearm are pretty much totally up to you. I rarely use these things. Really, it's just about having that solid primary that you can take advantage of with all this other stuff. Getting into the gear, we start out with the Catharsis Mask. Now, this is not a necessity. If you wanted to run something like the Coyotes, you totally could. I find it very hard to play without Catharsis these days. I think it's such a prevalent and good exotic for PvP. Basically, if you don't know how it works, when you take damage, you build up stacks of you gaining more weapon damage. Then when they max out, it purges status effects if you get tagged by a really strong fire or a bleed or something like that, and it drops a healing cloud that you can then stand in and get a lot of your armor back. So it's just a really good exotic for the general PvP style of gameplay, and I find it, like I said, hard to play without it. Comes with the standard rolls there of armor, and then I have a crit chance mod on there. Moving on to the chest piece, we have one piece of Fenris to get the 10% AR damage. That's of course because we have an AR as our primary. Armor, crit damage, crit chance mod, and Unbreakable on this one. Unbreakable is just really good in PvP. If you wanted to go 6 blues, 6 blue cores that is, and run something like Obliterate, you could, but I think Unbreakable, and we have a 4 and 2 distribution, is pretty solid, and that's just kind of what I'm comfortable using, so that's what I recommend. For the holster, this is one big deviation from the standard Slayer build that I've shown on here before, where you're using one piece of Seska to get the 10% crit chance on the brand bonus. Now, this is because, like I said before, having close to the max amount of crit chance in Conflict is now kind of rare, because you're losing out on that shade bonus. Unless you're specifically building to get towards that cap, a lot of people are going to be sitting around 30, 40, 45, 50. This is part of how on an AR we're making sure that we're still getting close to the cap. Now, that is not a necessity, right? If you want to use something like the Bakaros holster, which is typically what I would run in these cases, you can do that and you will still put out a lot of good damage. In my testing, these two are pretty darn close. Like, I don't think you're going to notice a major difference whether or not you run Seska or Bakaros. The reason I ended up going with Seska, and this is something I tested a lot, was just because it felt a bit more consistent. Because our crit was at near that 60% value, my damage just seemed to be a bit more consistent and predictable over time compared to Bakaros. Like I said, I encourage you to try that out on your own, find out what works best for you, but that is just my general recommendation, is that I think one piece of Seska on here is going to feel pretty nice. On here I have armor, crit damage, and crit chance. Moving on to the backpack, we have one of 2 pieces of Walker and Harris, that is to get the 5% weapon damage and 5% damage to armor brand bonuses. on your way of weapon damage, crit chance, crit damage mod with Companion. Now, Companion prior to this update was something that I tended to run more in the Dark Zone, but it has been, worked very well for me so far in Conflict this update. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, it's just a really good talent, right? If you're near an ally or a skill, you get increased 15% weapon damage. That's solid. It's not something like Vigilance, where as soon as you get shot, you lose it. As long as you have that thing nearby you, it will still be active. And with how much more, I would say almost team focused things feel now, you'll have an even higher uptime on this, even not just from your own skills. So this is a very good talent. I recommend you try it out. And like I said, this kind of really does make it the Conflict version of that Slayer build that I've shown before for the Dark Zone, but this one just works really well for how Conflict functions as a mode. Then for the gloves, we have our second piece of Walker and Harris. The classic debate here is whether or not you run this or Contractor's gloves. The answer is either way is going to feel very similar. From the testing I've done, I think if you are already running one piece of Walker and you run the second piece and you're building a lot of crit like we're trying to on this build, you will get a slight, very slight damage bump running two-piece Walker instead of Contractors, and that's just because you get the extra roll on the piece. Essentially, it comes down to 3% damage to armor doesn't outclass the crit roll that you get extra. That's what I found in my own testing and what I've been told by some other people. Like I said, either way is going to be very, very close, so don't feel too stressed about it either way. But my recommendation is you do the two Walker and Harris. And lastly, for the knee pads, no surprise, Fox's Prayer is the classic for good damage. We got armor, the detox roll there, and crit damage. Then for our skills, we firstly come to the Stinger Hive. Now this is not a necessity. If you want to run something like the Revive Hive, now that it has a way faster pickup speed, you can. That's what I was running a lot when the update first dropped. The reason I ended up going with the Stinger Hive is twofold. One, it can serve as a really good backup for Companion, right? If your other skill is down, if you're not near any allies, you can drop this and be sure that you're getting that damage increase. But two, it's just a really good area denial skill. Even though we're investing 0 into skill tiers or any skill power of any sort on this build, it's just nice. And it kind of dissuades enemies from running through it, even though I think they know it's not going to damage them that much. It's just a thing in your brain that's like, I don't want to run through this thing that I know is going to damage me. So in that sense, it's a really useful skill for Conflict. But like I said, whatever skills you personally find useful, I recommend you slot in there. Then for this one, I do highly recommend the Explosive Seeker Mine. This is one of the best things to run to proc Companion because it's just going to follow you around. If you drop it at your side, it's there until you target someone with it specifically, which you can do for a good stagger effect. But with an uptime of, I think, over 2 minutes, this is just a really good Companion procer, basically, where you don't have to worry about being near teammates. You don't have to really even think about it. You just drop it at your side, let it follow you around, and you'll get that 15% damage increase. And then lastly, also no surprise with the Firewall specialization, purely because the medkit remains super strong. The armor kit, I should say, that gives you 200% of your armor over a 10-second duration. Not much that can compete, but as usual, if you have something that you think would be more applicable to your playstyle or ideas, test that out, but I recommend Firewall. And there you have it, folks. Finally, you've got the formula in your hands, and I hope at least for some of you, this can help you start getting some more wins in Conflict. Once again, I appreciate everybody's patience on me getting this video done and out the door, but hopefully you found it worth it. If you did find the video useful and you want to be sure to catch all my future ones, then be sure to hit that subscribe button. I would sincerely appreciate it. And let me know any of your thoughts, questions, etc. on the build down in the comments below, as well as what you've been using so far this update. Sharing different ideas around is always a great thing, especially when it can help folks find a playstyle that fits for them. But that's going to do it for me today, everybody. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. RogueGold. Ow.